Hello and welcome to the TFF podcast by Fantasy Football Hub, our second and long-awaited episode of the 2022-23 season as we talk all things Telegraph fantasy football. My name is Fergie and I'm joined as usual by two superb Telegraph fantasy managers. Firstly, Luke Wilson. Luke, how are you? And have you enjoyed the World Cup?
I am good.
You have to think about that.
No, I'm still trying to work out if I've enjoyed the World Cup. I think England did well.
They did.
Still think Southgate as a manager, he's brilliant for morale. Tactically, again, Sterling, what was he doing bringing Sterling on a game when you got to keep the ball? But no, it's been good. I don't want Argentina and France in the final, and we've got them. So if at the start of the tournament, those are the two teams I didn't want to get to the final. So I should have put a lot of money on that.
Indeed.
But yeah, it should never have been in Qatar. That's the other thing. So, but no, sort of enjoyed it. My middle son is of the right age and he's got right into it. So that's been lovely.
Good.
So for that, this is the one that he'll remember. So this is my equivalent to Italian 90.
And mine was Italian 90 as well. That was the one. I was 10 and it was just absolutely captured me. It was amazing.
So that's what I got the most joy from, is just seeing him properly get into it. That was brilliant.
And speaking of early World Cups, we now have someone whose earliest memory was probably about 1962 World Cup, the Hub's resident statistician, Carl Weeks. Welcome, Carl. How have things been with you whenever you enjoy the World Cup?
No, things are good with me. I've watched quite a bit of the World Cup. I wouldn't sort of say that I've overly enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it in some ways. I don't know what it's lacked. It's lacked something to me, whether it's because it's in the winter or whether it's because it's the look of the pitch. There's something quite missing. And even though there's been upsets, I like seeing all the big teams play each other like in the last 16 or in the quarters.
Yeah.
And it's just a shame that you haven't had those, like England-France big game. But apart from that, it's a shame we missed out on Brazil, Argentina. Okay, Netherlands, Argentina is fine. But yeah, I'll watch it, and I will watch the final because I'll play some games, and I've still got a little bit going on. But my earliest memory isn't 1962. I wasn't even born.
Sorry, Carl.
I wasn't even born in '66, and I was hoping that this year I'm hoping to see England win the World Cup before I die, and I've missed the opportunity.
You're not on death's door, are you, Carl? Is this something you haven't told us?
You're running out of time. They're only every 4 years. Maybe they'll be every 2 years very soon. But my earliest World Cup memory is 1978, Argentina playing Holland or the Netherlands in the final. And I always remember my primary school teacher saying to me, "Who are you supporting in the final?" And I said, "Argentina." And she sort of told me off. I didn't know any better. She said I should be supporting Holland because they're European. And of course, I was only at primary school. I didn't know the difference between European and South America. So ever since then, I've always supported European teams. So I'll be supporting France. I supported France tonight against Morocco, and I'll be supporting them in the final. So there we go.
Good stuff. Glad you've enjoyed. I did enjoy.
How was it for you?
I enjoyed it until Wales played Iran, and that was a very disappointing morning. I actually watched it in my son's school. There was like hundreds of screaming.
Was anybody else there? Yeah.
No. There was only me.
Just randomly broke in.
No, there was like a bring the parents thing, and it was hundreds of kids, and I was just pretty angry just because like I think Welsh supporters have been spoilt, ever since probably the qualifying for Euro 2016. We played really well and just had a strategy of don't concede and get and have a bit of magic off Bale or someone to kind of get us through, and it's worked. But for some reason we changed that for this World Cup, and it was just so poor. And Iran absolutely deservedly beat Wales, and then that obviously put a real damper on that England-Wales game, because for me England-Wales is just what a spectacle it would have been if they'd have gone in on the same amount of points. They could have knocked each other out, but as it was, England only needed to sit back, draw, and and obviously pick us off, which they did. So yeah, that Iran game wasn't the best, but made a World Cup. With the expansion next time now, hopefully make another World Cup, and it was my boys' first one, which is a bit disappointing because I think they were expecting a bit more because they've been spoiled because all they know is Wales reaching the semi-finals of the Euros in 2016 and stuff. But other than that, I thought England were unlucky, and I think it's been a good World Cup. I've quite enjoyed it, but I kind of give you a point, Carl. I think it's this whole thing of it being in the winter, in the middle of a Premier League season. It just hasn't really had chance to stand out, I would say. If it was in the summer with a massive break either side, and I think the weather and things helps as well. You have garden parties and drinks out the back, and and all this sort of stuff. I've been able to do that. It's been absolutely bloody freezing. Yeah. So, but anyway, enough about that. Back to Telegraph. For our YouTube watchers, if you haven't subscribed yet, please press the subscribe button in the bottom right corner of the screen to ensure you don't miss anything. And also, please press the like button if you enjoy our content. So for this podcast, we have oodles of stuff to chat in this pretty unique season in terms of the structure, but also the top scoring players with a massive shift from the norm, with Liverpool absolutely dreadful and Newcastle and Arsenal absolutely flying. So we will look at what the data is telling us, courtesy of Carl, as usual, about the season so far before delving into the restart and trying to identify the best way to attack the new year. But firstly, let's just have a quick look at our teams. And firstly, we have Carl's team up. Carl, do you just want to give us a brief rundown on how you've done so far this season?
Yeah, unfortunately, my season to date hasn't been the best for a whole host of reasons. Mainly, I've gone big at the back, which has been a successful methodology historically. Gone with Liverpool and Man City defenders, and they've let me down, or they just haven't performed at the heights, which I'm sure we'll come to later. However, putting that to one side, I've still got lots to play for. I've still got I've used 12 transfers so far, so what's that, 28 still remaining. My team at the moment, I've got a 4-4-2. I've had a few injuries, so I've sort of I brought in a couple of Crystal Palace players in Gay and Lise, partly on build up to the World Cup. There's a few injuries, not knowing who's going to be away. I thought they'd be fine coming out the other side and more likely to participate in regular matches in the new year. I've got McAllister, Paulinho and Martinelli in my midfield. My other defenders is Silva, Cancelo, Trippier and Pope in goal. And up front, I've got Mitrovic and Haaland. So
must have some money in the bank,
yeah.
Have you, Carl?
I don't know, to be honest. I didn't have a look. I don't so.
You have. You. It looks like you've got about 5 or 6 million in the bank, in all honesty.
I need to have a check because I haven't looked up. But Martinelli is quite expensive, if I remember rightly. I don't normally have
4.1
expensive. Yeah, but anyway, so that's my team, and I'm hoping that to start using some transfers, loosen the purse strings.
Yep.
They want Scrooge is out the way, and sort of see if I can feast on some goodies.
So you're ranked 18,500 there, Carl, which is not bad because, as you say, with your transfer count, that is pretty good. So yeah, a solid start. It's probably fair to say. Solid start. Let's have a look at Luke's team. Luke, your team looks pretty good. How are you doing?
So I've hit my target, 10 transfers. 4 of them were in fact actually 6 of my transfers have been removing Liverpool because I brought Salah in and out a couple of times. That was a wonderful bit of advice. With four, I was just checking. I had 4 Liverpool defenders out of my back 5, which was so, didn't start with Haaland in the starting 11. That's a dead team now, isn't it? Yeah. But actually, I'm very happy with the team. McAllister is probably the only player that in my head I'm like, yeah, I probably want him.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see, Pereira scores a goal every 3 games, which is way above for his value. Felina just tackles.
Unbelievable. 65 tackles he's had this season so far. That is insane.
I think despite Haaland, he's the most important player in the game, would be my view this season. KDB, Haaland, Kane. I mean, get any normal season, everybody would be going, oh, Kane's having an outstanding season. He scores what 8% of games or something. I mean, you'd snap your hand off for that. But Haaland's, it's a 10-man team now, isn't it? Really well. Actually 9 if you've got Felina in there. So I think, the only one I'm looking at possibly moving on is Alisson. But in my head, I keep going, at some point, Liverpool have got to be Liverpool. I'm bang on, spent my budget, but only used 10 transfers, which is, I think I wanted to use less than, 10 or less.
Yeah.
So I'm fine with that because normally I've used about 14 at this point. So
really good work.
So
really good team.
Pretty happy. I don't want to make any subs either, other than Alisson is a luxury. We'll come on to that later for fixtures because I can get more games with other players. But I don't need to transfer anyone, which is a weird thing to say at this stage of the season.
And what's your overall rank at the moment?
11k. I've got 2 other teams that are doing better than that, with very similar teams, but not. I think you're above me actually, if I remember rightly. Because I'm interested in your transfer count.
Well, let's touch on that then. So, my team at the moment, I've got a couple of stinkers in there still, because I've been incredibly tight on the purse strings. I've got Alisson in goal. I've kept the faith with Dyer, who's actually done okay. He's got a couple of goals as well, which is quite fortunate. But yeah, he's done all right for 3.2 million. Brought in Saliba quite quickly when it was obvious, he was going to be an absolute steal. Glad I went for Cancelo, and I've still got Trent Alexander-Arnold in my team. I can't get rid of him at the moment. I've got Palhinha in midfield. I've got Tyler Adams, who I'm quite happy with, 2.6 million. He's the second highest tackler in the game behind Palhinha. So he's getting like 3 or 4 points every game, even though he is banned for the game, Leeds next game on Boxing Day. As is Gehi. Carl, you'll be unpleased to find out he's banned for the next game as well. And I've still got Brennan Johnson as well. I got Brennan Johnson, but he did get an assist and tackle bonus, I think, in his last match for me. So for his price, he's actually done okay. But I don't think he started 2 of the last 3 or 4 games, so he needs to find a way out. And then up front, Salah, got him as well. Haaland and Kane. So this particular team is around 19k. It was doing all right. It was about half that rank about 2 or 3 weeks before. But I've only used 5 transfers in this team. So I've been very tight, on purpose, been tight because of the World Cup, but also because I'm absolutely determined to try and follow my own advice, which I don't do year on year, which is to really attack the fixture swings, which we haven't had yet. So every time I look to take out Salah or Trent, for example, I'll look, and say I want to go to Trippier, who's my obvious omission here, who I need to get in. I'll look at the fixtures and it's like Liverpool game, Newcastle game, and then Liverpool game again, and then Newcastle game again, and Liverpool. So there's never been any real obvious opportunity to get him in for any kind of additional fixtures. But Trippier's been fantastic. He will be in my team very, very soon. Like even like Trent out to Trippier saves me over 2 million, I think, straight away, like 2.2 million, which I can then upgrade Brennan Johnson or something like that. So, but I tried to be really, really frugal. I've got a number of other teams, roughly the same transfer count. My best team is around 7.5k with 34 transfers left, and that team is very similar to this. I think the only difference is probably, I think in that one I've got like Dewsbury Hall instead of Johnson, and I've got Trippier in early or something. So, but it's early days, and I think it's tough in Telegraph because there seems to be all these opportunities to use these transfers early doors. But we all know, all 3 of us, everyone who plays Telegraph knows when it comes to April or May, how we'd wished we had kept some back so we could really take advantage of the things. And obviously we'll touch on this now. So overall I'm reasonably pleased with my, I say ranked 19k is not fantastic, but I have a pretty solid team with 34 transfers. I'm pretty happy.
Got to remember a few years back, I think you finished about 3k or 2.5k or something, and you were ranked about, well, at one point you went over 100k, didn't you?
Yeah,
you were
definitely
around 70k not long before, because we did the October podcast, and you were about 70k still, and you rocketed up after that.
Remember I had that meltdown when I made 5 transfers in one day, and I brought in Jimenez, and I had an absolute meltdown. Brought in Jimenez, and Jimenez scored an own goal after I brought him in, and I was so angry. But I remember that day. But no, I'm like, we've all played long enough to kind of know that the first half of the season is not about making massive gains, is it? Right? It's getting your team structure right. It's getting your team in really good shape to be able to attack the second half of the season. That's what we've all done. So good stuff there. Let's have a look at the top point scorers so far, and well, this is not a normal season. It's probably fair to say. The top 3 point scorers for keepers, defenders, and midfielders are all Newcastle players. So let's have a quick look at the keepers first. Nick Pope, top scoring with 79. Ramsdale, 71. Alisson, 70. Fabianski, 65. Pickford, 65. Raya, 64. Normally you would have Edison up there, and maybe De Gea or someone like that, or a Spurs keeper. But Nick Pope and Ramsdale, and an interesting one, Danny Ward, 2.5 million, had an absolute stinker to start off with, but he recently they've kept a lot of clean sheets, so he's been doing well. Defenders, Trippier, he's been absolutely fantastic. Newcastle have been brilliant. He's been brilliant. 76 points at just 3.3 million, one absolute bargain. Well done to anyone who picked him up early. Quite surprisingly for me, Gabriel in second place with 67 points. I know he did score, didn't he? Either the last weekend or the weekend before that, which would have helped. But Arsenal defenders done really well. William Saliba, 2.5 million, has been absolutely sensational for Arsenal. João Cancelo is still up there, 5.4 million. And then you come to Shah, Ben White, Botman, and Dan Burn. Newcastle and Arsenal absolutely smashing it at the back. 7 of the 8 top defenders are Newcastle or Arsenal defenders. So if you pick them up at the start, you've had an absolute storming start. Midfielders, well, what can I say? Top of the shop, Miguel Almiron is the top point scorer midfielder with 84 points, which is absolutely incredible. 3.7 million for Newcastle. Kevin De Bruyne, second with 77. James Maddison, 77. Trossard, 73. Foden, 73. Saka, 71. Martinelli, 68. And some other names in there, which is really interesting. So just underneath those, you've got players like McAllister, Billin, Bentancur, and Palhinha, who are more known for their kind of tackle bonus and things, who are actually making it into the upper echelons of there as well. I think they have all had some attacking returns as well, but some amazing value players in there, really, really cheap. And then just to touch on the strikers, Erling Haaland, I mean, what a revelation. He's been absolutely insane. 122 points after what have we played? Like 50, I think Man City played like 15 games or something. 122 points. Harry Kane with a measly 93 points, as you mentioned earlier, Luke. Any other season, he would be the main man. And we have to big it up for Ivan Toney, 4.6 million. He has been absolutely superb, 79 points. Rodrigo from Leeds, surprisingly, when he's fit, is absolutely smashing it. Only 4.2 million. He's got 72 points. Salah with 70 before we go down there. But yeah, they're the top point scorers at the moment. Carl, what are your takeaways or thoughts about this so far? It's not a normal looking season, is it?
No, it's not normal at all. And you just look at the defenders, and you mentioned Cancelo, and there's no other Man City or Liverpool players up there. You have to go right down the list to see Van Dijk and Robinson. I can't even see Trent there.
Trent's not even in the top 20 for defence.
Yeah, it's just amazing. Yeah, some of it's some of it is a bit of variance, but Liverpool have just performed badly this first half, and if it's a normal season, you just stay away. And it'd be very interesting to see what happens post World Cup. Do they come back to the Liverpool that we know, or do they continue churning out the performances that they've had? But yeah, no Chelsea, which is another name that I know. The three teams I looked for: Chelsea, Liverpool, Man City. Top defenders, lots of clean sheets, and they're nowhere to be seen. And that's been one of my costs this year is having those people as well as Salah, but top picks just not there. Again, the midfielders, well, you've got Madsen up there, Foden, Saka, but you've got a lot of good value players, cheap, and like you say, for the tackling, and the forwards. The list is basically, as you know, except as you say, Rodrigo. But yeah, it's take your pick. It's like you can be a kid in a candy store because you can afford them all.
This is it, right? So I've done my list. So every podcast, I do a list of players who I think are good value and who I'd be really interested in getting in my team. And normally I have about a list of, I don't know, 1 or 2 keepers, 4 or 5 defenders, 4 or 5 midfielders, and 3 or 4 strikers. I've got about 20 in each position, just because, as you say, Carl, it's literally take any of these players. Brilliant picks. We haven't even mentioned a lot of the key picks we're going to be talking about in a bit when we get on to, but there's so many amazing options. It's incredible. Luke, what are your kind of early thoughts and takeaways of the top point scorers so far?
Well, I think probably the greatest stat there is that Alex Iwobi is beating all bar 7 of the defenders. I mean, I backed that at the start. Do you remember on that initial podcast pre-season?
Yeah.
It's all, what is that about? No, I agree with Carl. I mean, it's weird. Like, was it one Man City defender in the top 10? Or it's bonkers. I think I'm not sure about Chelsea. I mean, Man City and Liverpool, they will come good because they'll end up winning loads of stuff. And you got to remember, City have had a lot of injuries, so Cancelo's the only City player that's really been ever present because Walker started well, got injured. Diaz has been injured. Stones has been injured. I can't remember the name of the kiddie that's come in who's done well. He's done well, but then he seemed to lose his place towards the last couple of games, if I remember rightly. So there's been a lot of chopping and changing. So I think that's why you're not seeing the City players there because they've been pretty good defensively. But yeah, Almiron. I had two amazing transfers. I had Almiron for a bit and then sold him thinking, this won't last. I started with Martinelli as well.
Wow.
And then sold him. I think I sold him for a Liverpool player. I think he was my move to get to Salah because I had the money in the bank. But I did start with Saliba, who I think, I'm just skimming, I haven't jumped ahead on the slides, but I think at 2.5 is probably the best value player in the game. And so it's going to, I'm interested. It's probably worth going on to the next bit because there's, Haaland's broken the game.
Haaland has broken the game. And you're absolutely right in terms of points per million. So this is the value. This is the metric we all kind of look at to pick those really cheap bargain players. Ward in goals, really, really high. I think he's got he's got the 3rd highest points per million in the whole game. He could be one moving forward. You're like Alisson to Ward, potentially frees up a couple of million. And the way that keepers now get the bonus points for saves, I don't think that's the worst move in the world, or an example of a move where you could easily free up a couple of million. In defence, Saliba, as you say, is the best value player in the game. Quickly followed actually by Tavernier for Bournemouth in midfield, who was kind of shot up from nowhere really, but he's 2.4 million. He scored 62 points and he's got a point per million of 25.8, which is only just behind.
I'm spotted totally under my radar. He is.
Yeah, he had a haul a couple of weeks before we broke up. I think he sort of had like a goal and 2 assists or something, but 2.4 million. He looks incredibly good. And in the forward line, obviously Haaland is up there behind him. Tony and Rodrigo look to be the two best. But, Almiron's up there, Palhinha, Billing, Gross, Gibbs White at 2.3 million looks really, really another good, cheap enabler. He's taken corners now off Johnson as well, and he's been starting. So he scored 48 points, but he didn't actually start, or was kind of heavily involved at the games at the start, but he's come into his own now. Pereira, as you mentioned, 2.7 million. McAllister on penalties, tackle bonus, everything. So, he's really good there as well.
He's going to be a World Cup winner as well.
He could be a World Cup winner, which obviously means that you don't want to bring him in straight away because he's probably going to miss a few games, which is really unfortunate for owners, actually, because who would have thought? Because who would have thought he'd be a World Cup winner? But yeah.
They're all doing well. All the people who've got him are doing well. So what a shame. Really, it's a tragedy for you.
And the cheapest player in the game who's doing well is Somerville for Leeds. 2.2 million. He's got 40 points. So he has recently gone. He's had a run in the Leeds side and done very well too. So, Carl, value. What's your input on this? What are your thoughts?
Thoughts are there's just loads of good players there that really good value. All the ones that you sort of like mentioned. Somerville, I preferred the next slide myself, where it orders them points per million per game. It's basically the same players, and here you can pick up, like you mentioned, Somerville. In terms of the games he's played, he is only a smidgen behind Saliba. Once you take into account that he hasn't been playing all the games, so I think he's good value. But how much does he actually play? I know he's had a bit of a run in the team, but is that because of injury or whatever? So, but then you've got Taverner, Polino, all the names you listed. That's great. I mentioned two players. One of them is as a striker who you picked out. And I had him in all my teams to start with, and it's a bit of a disaster. But if he had played, is it a Wanyeo or Forest?
A Wanyeo, yeah.
Yeah, 2.3. In terms of value, if he played, because he's scoring like quite top, so he'd be a really good enabler. But unfortunately, he doesn't play. Gibbs White, like as you mentioned, is up there. Billing. Who's another one? Lavia, who's played because he's been injured.
Yeah.
So
right.
He's not going to be on the up on your list. But if you take out all the games that he missed, he's scoring at 1.3. Yeah. But he's only like 2.2 million. Yeah. If you need there's loads of them. There are absolutely loads of good value enablers that you can just slot in, which means if one gets injured, like in the past,
you're right.
Go, oh, what happens if they get dropped or injured? How do you reach? Well, it doesn't matter. You've just got a whole shop full. You can just pick and switch.
Wow, it's a very different season this season, isn't it? Normally you find one player at 2.4 million, and he's like, get him in, and leave him in. But as you say, there's an absolute host, isn't there? A question I've got, and we were asked a lot of it in the questions as well. I'm sure you guys are kind of asking yourself the same thing as well. Is, defense is a massive part of this game in terms of whether you go premium, whether you go cheap. You normally go premium or cheap, or whether you kind of have a little bit of both. But depending on who you pick in defense and whether you go for, 4 at the back or 5 at the back, usually has a direct impact on what you can do elsewhere on the pitch. And looking at it now, Newcastle, you can have Newcastle's back 4 there. For what's this? Probably, I think it's 12.1 million for a whole back 4. And if you chuck in Pope as well, 15.5 million, for example. Now, you could mix and match them with a couple of Arsenal players, Gabriel, Saliba, etc., which means that you could actually spend a bit more money up front or a bit more money in midfield. So, you mentioned Somerville, Lavia, and all these players, you could potentially upgrade them to maybe Almiron, Martinelli, or Foden, or Saka, or someone like that. But by doing that, you're kind of putting yourself in a pretty inflexible position that if all of a sudden you wanted to jump on Trent, Robertson, Cancelo, Edison, you'd have to take out players to get them in. So in a very roundabout way, the question I'm asking, I suppose, I'll ask you first, Luke, if that's all right. But what are your thoughts on defense moving forward? Are you going to keep it kind of a hybrid, or what are you doing?
I honestly don't know, because so I've got a couple of slots in my team that I'm happy to move people around. So my KDB one and my Foden one are at nice. The Foden one gets me to pretty much any of the premium defenders. Alisson is the other one I can get. I can go from him to any keeper. So those are the three that I'll probably be rotating with. Bar a massive swing of fixtures, I don't think I'm going to be moving on any of the value. So I think that's where I'm at. So I'm keeping all options open, because a team, and it will be, I think I think we talked about it in the preseason pod. We did say that Newcastle are probably undervalued given where they were. I think they are. Well, they're probably not overperforming. They're performing where they should be, but they're massively underpriced for where they should be.
Yeah.
So having a Newcastle player, I wouldn't get rid of them, and Trippier's the one that you want really at the price point. But yeah, I think it's keep my options open. Trent will be in the top 10 as long as he doesn't lose his place. He will be in the top 10. One of the City. I mean, Walker's back again, and I can't remember Walker's price, but Walker was fairly cheap compared to some of the other ones, I think. And he's fit and he looked good in the World Cup for England, so he will probably come straight back in. So I think there are players like that where you've got to keep yourself flexible, but at the same time, there's if you've got Saliba and Trippier, and maybe you have Dan Burn, and I know Ben White was one we picked out at the start. I mean, do you actually need to upgrade? Because you've got so much money left over, and particularly if you've got like Felina, which I think a lot of people do, and I don't know, even McAllister, but like, I don't know, if you have Felina and Gibbs White, I mean, you've got so much money left over, you can have the rest of the team can all be sort of 6-7 million anyway, if you've got that sort of team. I mean, one thing that, sorry, just to segue slightly back to pre-season, we in that pod, we were talking about the value that you could get. And I went and stuck that. I did put in a third team, which I very rarely do, and just put budget players everywhere. And that team started on fire, and it only dropped off when I started bringing in flipping premium players. If I'd stuck with the budget, I mean, look at Sarr. Sarr on the previous scheme, he was right. He's not up there, and it's bonkers that actually, if I just stuck with that starting 11, of my starting 11s, I think I had 8 million left in the bank. And it's my highest performing starting team with 8 million left in the bank at the start of the season. I mean, it's bonkers. So yeah, I thought, that's a very long answer to, keep it flexible.
But it's kind of this hybrid we're talking about, because Saliba and Trippier are so underpriced. It kind of allows you to be flexible with the rest of the price, the price points, don't it? What do you think, Carl, in terms of defense moving forward?
Yeah, well, I think it's much more about, as Luke was sort of saying, about for me, flexibility. I wouldn't be dreaming of going. You can afford to go block defense or fill 5 at the back with Man City, Liverpool, because you can fill up with quality midfielders that are a good value. But I wouldn't, because I haven't seen enough of them. They have underperformed, or they haven't performed as high as my expectation. I don't know who's been playing for those top teams. I wish I went for Newcastle in a certain sense. And Newcastle, not only the points that Luke made, but what struck me was in the League Cup, I can't remember, their first round match was away to somewhere like Grimsby or somewhere like, where everyone normally puts out the kids, and they put out their first team. They had Trippier, they had the full defense, and I thought they want to try to win a cup this year, or try, which makes me think that in the FA Cup they'll be playing strong teams. So like when you've got Liverpool, sometimes they have all the kids Man City. I don't think Newcastle will, and it's as well as performing exceedingly well during the league, I expect them to also have a good cup run and put out the strong team because they're not in Europe.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, but me, I think going forward from this point on, it will be about fixtures and trying to gain matches rather than I'm going to go 5 at the back.
Yeah.
So I think you can pick any formation you wish at the moment.
No, cool. Yeah, I agree.
I'm just going to have to pop off. Sorry, I have to answer the door.
That's okay. That's okay.
I'll be back in 2 minutes.
Yeah, all right.
There is one thing probably worth noting because, like, if you do look at the value, I don't know. I'm not completely sure on the ownership, but my instincts are telling me Ivan Toney will be significantly higher owned than Almiron, for example. But similar points, albeit Almiron's got 5 points more. But Almiron's almost $1 million cheaper as a midfielder. So I am, because I have deliberately not looked ahead on the slides. But if I see, for example, Toney coming in and being recommended more highly than Almiron, unless you're playing just one up front, in which case, yeah, the argument's there. Forwards are still overpriced, apart from Haaland, who's, well, he's still overpriced, but he's just smashing it. So
he's overpriced, but you could so Kane and Salah are overpriced, but we can afford them, and this is the difference this year. It's finding that mixture of the value players and then the top point scorers in the game. And this year we can have them. It's just choosing them because there's so much choice. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the top points per million per game one and the points per million. I'm struggling to find a player that's 4 million in any position other than the forwards. So, I mean, that just sums it up, is that you just have value. I mean, it's a value game. So, and you can just, that's where the money goes, isn't it? That's where you take your slight hit on value. But Haaland is still 1.36, which, and I think the normal figure at this sort of stage in the season, you're aiming for about 1.2 to 1.4. So he's right in that sweet spot of really good value, despite being overpriced, as all forwards are. Please change that next season.
Let's have a look at the impact of the bonus points, which has made a massive, I honestly think this was a real positive shift from the Telegraph last season in terms of the keepers and midfielders. Obviously, they started the bonus points to try and bring other players into the game, and that's exactly what they've done, and it really has opened the game up. I think it's absolutely brilliant. Looking at the keepers, number of, so this is by save points. So David Raya for Brentford has earned 28 save points. Leno from Fulham, 27. Pickford from Everton, 27. Henderson from Forest, 22. Alisson from Liverpool. This is how bad they defended. He's had to make one of the highest amount of saves in the league. He has to make 46 saves for 21 points. Then Lloris, Pope, and Fabianski. Ward is in there as well, so he's had to make 18 saves. And then tackles, João Palhinha of Fulham, 2.8 million. If you haven't got him in your team, find a way to get him in. He has made 65 tackles and earned 29 tackle points, which is the equivalent of 6 goals, which is absolutely insane. Yeah, and he's also served his ban now as well. So his points haul include 5 yellow cards and a ban as well. But he is the one. Adams, I mentioned earlier, for Leeds, so he's in my team. He has made 49 tackles, 20 points. Soucek for West Ham, we haven't really mentioned him much. 3.3 million, 19 points. McAllister for Brighton, 3.4 million. He's made 45 tackles, 19 points, but he's also on penalties. So he looks a real one going forward once he obviously recovers from his World Cup final hangover. Casado for Brighton, also his partner, 2.8 million, very, very cheap, 19 points as well. And then there's a few more. I quite like the look of Bentancur for Spurs. He's also quite an attacking player. I think I mentioned him at the start of the season. Being a Spurs fan, watched him a lot last year, and he looks very, very good. He's 3.5 million, 15 tackle points, but he's also gets the odd goal and assist as well. Looking down, Casemiro from Man United has got 13 tackle, 3.7 million, but he hasn't played many games. I think he's definitely one to look out for as well. Scored the odd goal as well. And Bruno Gomes is another one who looks really, really good. Only 12 tackle points, but for 3.6 million there as well. Goals, assists, and everything. And Tavernier, part of the reason why he has done so well, at 2.4 million, 26 tackles made, 11 tackle points there. Carl, you love the bonus points. What's your kind of thoughts on the impact of it within the game, and what are your takeaways really so far?
I enjoy them. I think it's, as you sort of said in your intro, it sort of like makes other players more viable, which is a good thing. So it makes the template a bit wider and a bit more flexible. The one thing that I think they could probably should have done was alter the price accordingly. So as you've sort of seen in the previous charts, all these people are Polino's got, you say, the equivalent of 6 goals, and he's only 2.8 million. So can you imagine how many midfielders have got 6 goals? They're like 6 million. And therefore it's much. I wish they had a bit higher of a price. But because one thing I'd say about tackles is they're probably quite consistent. And saves. It's not like goals you could go like a drought, especially for midfielders, and then 3 or 4 in quick succession, and then not score for another 10. These people are putting in tackles week in, week out, and picking up 2 or 3 points. Well, as you can see, he's got 29 points, so that's like 2 points a game. That's like a guaranteed, near enough guaranteed assist.
Insane.
2/3 of an assist every game, let alone when he does one. So yeah, it's brilliant, and especially if you see this table, you know which ones are the best ones to take. That naturally you'll have to take your football knowledge, like McGinn. You've got their different manager, so you have to wait and see what happens with Villa going forward, if that will still carry on. But yeah, but very good indeed.
And Luke, how about yourself?
I think there's a couple of names that you picked out as you were reading down, but Casemiro is really interesting. So I'm just looking at the stats there. He's only started 7 games, and I know he's subbed on, but I know a couple of those subs were late on just to sort of welcome him to the club. He's got 32 tackles from 7 games. Felina's got 65 from 14, so he's basically on par. So he will be at the end of the season on top of that table. I mean, whether the 0.9 extra spend warrants it for, Man United, Man United are a better team than Fulham. I mean, they're not a better team than a lot of teams these days, but he, like you say, he could, with the odd goal and in a more attacking team, he could be a really interesting under the radar pick. The other one is Bruno Gomes, because he was out for the first, I think, 3 or 4 games of the season, and he didn't look the same player as last season for the first 3 that he played. And I think it's only the last 4 or 5 games. There was one game where he racked up almost double figures of tackles, and he scored, and he was just bossing it. So I think if I'm looking down the list, I think those are probably so Bruno and Casemiro are probably the 2 that I think will raise considerably. I think Souček's always up there because of the style of football. He's a mainstay. McAllister, I think, will continue to be up there. But yeah, and Tielemans, actually, he's turned a bit of a corner. His form's picked up. I noticed he's sort of, since the rumours of him leaving and stuff have gone, that impacted him at the start of the season. So there are a few players where I'd expect them to rise a little bit. But yeah, the bonus points, to the point you made at the start, the bonus points are a wonderful addition to this game. But similar to the strikers, it now means that the defensive midfielders are underpriced as opposed to overpriced like the forwards. So we've just got to balance it out a little bit.
If you were to pick a keeper now, so if we were starting a fresh game from now and you had to choose a goalkeeper, who would you choose?
Safe pick would be Pope. Value pick would be Ward.
Okay. And how about you, Carl? Who would you pick now?
I'd definitely go for Pope.
Okay.
Um, Ward, yes, just because his price is so like 2.5. Unless they've just, but they've had like 5 clean sheets on the bounce. And another one possible would be Kepa.
Yeah. 2.2.
Yeah, only, but of course he may be injured, so
Can I
he's still fairly cheap.
Can I chuck it? I mean, it sounds bonkers, right? But Alisson has got 70 points. He's like 20, 25 points above all of the Liverpool defenders because he's very good. So he's very good when he's not getting shots and keeps his concentration. And he's very good when he is getting shots because he's actually a very good keeper. So he's not as good value, but I don't know. I'd probably chuck Alisson in as my third, just as a bit of a wild card keeper. I mean, picking the best keeper in the league for the last 4 seasons. What a wild card that is.
I think.
How about you?
I think I go for Pope. I think he's got that nice mixture of good defense, but also makes saves as well. That I've kept Alisson, and as you say, he's done all right. And it's only because we don't need money. If we needed money, if I needed to squeeze out, $500,000 or $1 million from somewhere, he'd be the person I'd go down to, either Pope or Ward or Kepa. But at the moment, you just don't need the money. It's just because of the players. Well, I've got Salib or Adams and Palhinha, who are like the most expensive of those is 2.8 million, and Brennan Johnson, who he could go to anyone really, but so many cheap players. All that I've probably already mentioned north of 20 players under 3 million who could do a job in anyone's team. Who if you looked, you wouldn't go, what are you doing with him in your team? There's so many. So, but yeah, a really good addition, and it's really made the game. It's really opened the game up, really, really well. So, I think for me, the other question for you guys, in terms of Palhinha and Adams, and if I bring a third one in, for example, if I go for, I don't know, for Tavernier potentially, or someone like that, I would plan on just leave those in all season, not touch them, just let them kind of rack up 3-4 points every single game. And just use my transfers then elsewhere on, block defenses, kind of shifting between block defenses or shifting between attackers. Is that what you would do, or would you look to maybe switch them about a little bit? What do you think, Carl?
Well, that's a very good question. In many ways, the right answer is to get them and just stick with them and not to make the transfers, because even though they're good value and you may gain a game out of them, they won't get the high number of points. Yeah. So it's much better to transfer into higher priced ones because you're more likely to get more points from them. So yeah, once you're content, just stay with them, unless you wish to change because of a bit of a cut run. And there are, 3 or 4 games that you're going to be taking advantage of. But and there's a lot of unknowns coming up in terms of the FA Cup, League Cup, and rearranged fixtures to go back in. But yeah, no, I would tend on the whole to stick as much as you could.
Good stuff. And what about you, Luke?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry, I was with the sun coming through the door saying goodnight at that point. What was the question? So apologies for that one.
That's okay. It was, do we stick on, these tackle merchants for the season, or do we look to maybe
up them? They're only getting moved on. Yeah. If I need to free up money, which sounds ridiculous, but if I can go, I don't know, from Felina to Gibbs White is $500,000 still, and that would be the only reason that I move them on. The only other reason I think is if there's a phenomenal, I don't know, a 4-for-1 on one of the other budgets. I mean, I think it warrants it this season because they are racking up points. If you think of them as I know, £3.5 to £4 million players, these high tacklers. If you remove the pound note figure on them, you would consider it. If you think, well, actually, I can get 12 points from that move. 10 points is what I aim for per transfer. So if I think I'm going to get 10 more points because I'll get a 4-for-1, then I'll do it. But really unlikely, because you want to attack the goals. Really, that's where you get your massive swings of movement.
Yep, agree. Good stuff. Let's just have a quick look at the Optimum team. Apologies, Carl. A couple of the slides don't seem to have traced across, so we've hopped on to Optimum team now. Do you just want to run through this, because this is always my favourite. It's always my favourite part of the podcast. I absolutely love it, and it's very different to what we normally see as well, isn't it, this time? Oh, you're on mute, I think, Carl.
Yeah, so it's a 3-4-3 formation. Before I run through the team, when you look, I've done some sort of charts about looking at the value and formations, etc. And once you sort of like extract Haaland out of the equation, it would basically sort of say it's indifferent of whether you go with well, it says have one striker, which should be Haaland, and whichever formation you wish to fit around that. And in terms of where you'd put your money in, once you've sorted out your formation, it's again very indifferent. So all the lines are like having the same slope. So it's basically sort of saying, hey, there's no right way or wrong way to play this game. It's any formation you want and get the best value out of those. And that's why we're sort of seeing different formations as the optimal team. And so it's gone for 3-4-3. We're only spending 49.3 million, so it's not even using up the full budget.
Wow. So
it's littered in the defence or with Newcastle players. So you've got Pope in goal, Trippier, Gabriel, and Sablida for Arsenal. And then in midfield you've got Almiron, Maddison, Trossard, and Foden. And then up front you've got Haaland, Kane, and Tony. So the interesting thing is Kane not being anywhere near as value for money in terms of points per pound, sorry. But because you've got so much money,
exactly,
it's you don't want even like an extra 4 million in your bank because it earns nothing. So it actually brings him in. So that's quite interesting in its own right, that that you can afford to carry Kane in the optimal team, and those in total would have a total of 888 points, which would put you in 12th place at the moment, and the leaders are 926. And when I look through that player list, I wouldn't sort of say there's anybody that you sort of say, well, maybe Almiron at the beginning of the season about having him. And I know that you mentioned on the Green Arrow about him being a bright spot. But at the beginning of the season, it would have been St. Maximum, and you wouldn't expected him to be playing. But he's had his chance, and he's taken it with both hands.
Even now, during the World Cup, Newcastle been playing some friendlies, and he scored 2 in his last friendly. He's still on fire, and I think he's definitely one I'm looking to bring into my team, an upgrade from Brennan Johnson to Almiron potentially. But just a question for you, Carl, is so this formation, this optimum formation at the moment of 3-4-3. If we did another podcast potentially in the international break at like the end of March, the next one, what would you expect the formation to be?
So there's one other thing that just struck me.
Oh yeah, go on. Sorry.
No, it's been talking about all the fantastic enablers like Paulinho and all that sort of stuff, and none of them have made the team.
No, they haven't. They haven't, have they? That's incredible.
It's like yeah. I'm just amazed. I've just noticed it now. I was thinking, Trossard, probably wouldn't have guessed him so much.
I was just going to make that point, actually, that if you drop Maddison down to McAllister and Foden down to Felina, suddenly you've got about 5 million plus in the bank, and you're only down about, I think it's 18 or 19 points on that.
Crazy.
So I mean, it's bonkers.
It's a cheap defense, isn't it?
The
It's
two
cheap
most
defense.
expensive players in the game by two of the top three. It's bonkers.
And that's because all the expensive defenders that we've always had in the past haven't been making it. There's no, as we've seen from previous lists, no Man City, no Chelsea, no Liverpool. Like James, fantastic player, not there. Trent, not there. Cancelo didn't make the team. So going to your question, if we go to the international break, yes, I would expect this to be very similar. Unless one of these players falls off. Like Maddison was hitting golden form. Foden's... You aren't going to get those expensive players getting into the team whenever the international break is over the next few weeks. They'll never catch up. So you'll always have those Newcastle defenders and Arsenal defenders at that price. I would expect them still to be an optimal team and therefore very similar team. Now, whether you sort of say from now, if you started from now to the international break, I would still imagine it'd be similar, unless you see a big shift in output from Man City, which I don't expect, A, because of their rotation, and secondly, they got very, very difficult fixtures coming up and the volume of fixtures. And, Liverpool haven't given me any indication that they'll start picking up all these clean sheets. But we'll have to wait and see. So,
the interesting thing for me, I think, is about price points here, because Maddison was awful at the start of the season, or well, not awful, but he wasn't very good. He was dropped a couple of times. Foden started on fire. Foden subsequently dropped off the last 2-3 games. He keeps getting dropped, and Maddison's come in and absolutely smashed it. If you look at that 5.2 price point, that's the same price point as Trent and Cancelo and all of those sorts of people. So I think, we were talking earlier about fixtures probably being more important. I can't remember. I think it was you, Carl, that was saying that. It may have been you, Fergie. But I think if you've got those right price points, you've got so many options at all of those price points. And almost because there's value in every position, even some of the forwards now, you can just swap to the guy in form with 3 more games and then swap to the next one. And so you may go Tony to, I don't know, Trent, because you've got the money there, I think, to do that. And then you might go Maddison and Foden and bring in Salah and bring in one of the, Felina. And I think it's going to be about making sure you've got those price points. And that probably goes back to that previous point, Fergie. Yes, I probably would rotate those lower values, more likely looking at this optimum team, because I didn't expect this team, because Felina is off the chart value and he's not made it. So the value has become less important. So it's going to be more around that structure and the fixtures. It's very interesting.
I think for me, the killer question underneath all this is, do we think that the premium defenders are going to start, or the premium teams are going to start keeping clean sheets? Because I think that's been the difference this year, right? And that has affected the whole. It's affected the balance of the whole game. Liverpool and Man City not keeping clean sheets, because normally they would. This team is littered with those, and then all the other spaces are basically just filled around them. And I think that's the question for me. And I know, Luke, you've done a lot of analysis historically around clean sheets in seasons, and if I remember rightly, not to steal your thunder, but I think you said it tends to be more clean sheets at the start than at the end of the season, whereas now we're approaching the middle when they're historically non-clean sheets. So what do you think about, are we going to see more clean, are we going to start seeing the big teams getting clean sheets or not? Because that to me dictates how we approach the next month or two.
It's making me think, I don't know, poker or something, that, or torn other games where it's like they've been bad for a while, so they're going to come good. They're going to come good. And I don't know. I honestly don't know. I mean, my instincts, so my heart is telling me that getting on Trent, for example, now might be a really good thing, because he's always top 3 or 4 scoring players in the game every season, has been for donkey's years. And it's not like he's still in his 20s, so it's not like he's suddenly hit 34 and he's declining like someone like Vardy is. But I don't know. My head's like, but there's such value. Like, why would I go Trent when I've got Trippier? They're basically the same player for 2 million less. So I just don't. Yeah, it's a really tricky one. I do think. I mean, I think Man City will. I think Man City are too, and the reason they're not, Diaz isn't there, Stones isn't there, then Walker's not there, is because of the injuries.
Okay.
Right. So Cancelo was one of the top 3 or 4 scoring defenders from memory. So City are, I think they're fine. It's just they just need to be fit. Liverpool's a different question. I'd steer well clear of Chelsea until you see them hit 2 or 3 in a row. Liverpool, if they hit 2 in a row against decent teams, I'd probably be jumping on. Man City, if Walker comes straight back in, I'd probably be on it, I think. And you've got the rotation stuff, but then if they miss a game, they'll play the FA Cup, and so yeah, I don't know. It's very interesting. So I think the answer is heart, yes, for Liverpool and Man City. Head, probably veering more to no, because there's so much value elsewhere.
Just a point before I ask Carl the same question as well. Are we potentially, I say we, are we potentially underrating Newcastle and Arsenal as now being a premium defensive team? Because historically it's been City, Liverpool. I say historically over the last 3 or 4 seasons, but am I, or are we unfairly rating Newcastle and Arsenal as mid-table defences who are overperforming, or are we now thinking that they are the teams they are the best defences?
They're not the best defences, but they're probably 3rd and 4th. I would still say, end of the season, the top scorers will probably be Man City and Liverpool, right? Probably Arsenal 3rd, probably Newcastle 4th, based on what I've seen so far this season. But a lot of people are going to be blinkered by the prices and think, Salah 2.5, he's not going to be that great. Some people will have that mindset. If you remove the price tag from it, Salah is a top performing centre back who scores goals. Trippier, he hasn't had that many clean sheets. Like, he just gets an assist when Newcastle concede, or he scores a free kick. He's just like, he is Trent 2.0. I know he's a lot older, but his dead balls are amazing. Yeah. So I think if you took the price out of it, you treat them the same. I think those would be the top 4. I think that'll be the top 4 actually. I think it will be those. So yeah.
What do you think, Carl, about the whole defence thing?
Well, I think Arsenal and Newcastle are better than mid-table. The way the football that Arsenal played this year has been miles above than what you'd have expected, hence where they are in the league. Yeah. And therefore, I think they're probably people's expectations pre-season wouldn't have been top 4. And I think they've played that sort of level of quality. Now, when you sort of say the quality of the defenders may not be as good, but that doesn't matter. Like, Man City's defenders, like Cancelo, may not be the best defender, but it's the way Man City, if they keep the ball for 90% of the game, they don't concede goals, not because they've got good defenders, because they've got a good team. And I think Arsenal got a good team. And I think Newcastle played very solid, and they've got a good team. So I think that Arsenal and Newcastle will make up the bulk at the end of the season because they've got that head start. I would expect if you came from there, Man City and Liverpool would be above them, but not worth that. Not to me worth that additional expense. £2 million, £3 million. So you've got Saliba there, like Luke said, 2.5. You've got Robinson, and Van Dijk, 5.3. So you get 2 for the price of 1.
Yep.
And therefore, I would sort of say that they're the new value good defenders to have in. And the additional is neither of them have got either Europe that they'd be overly bothered about.
Yeah.
So I think Arsenal may, if they go deep, but I think winning the league or making top 4 would be their priority. Whereas Liverpool, Man City, games are coming thick and fast. Rotation injuries, and I don't know what's happened to Liverpool, but they are much more vulnerable. The defenders are still quality, but they get attacked a lot more. So
we know that Leicester season, nobody would have been on Leicester. No, we would have been having this same debate. I'm sure we probably did if we had the podcast. I think that was a couple of years before we started, but we would have been having the debate of Wheels probably going to fall off. You got to go with one of the other two. I don't think the wheels are going to fall off either of those teams. Newcastle aren't going to finish top, but they are going to be in the top 6. They are priced as a top 12 team, not a top 6 team. Arsenal, a top 6 team traditionally, are going to finish first, second, or third. They are going to probably first or second. And they seem to, I mean, they're what are they, 4 points clear at the moment, I think, from memory. God, it seems so long ago that the World Cup started. I can't remember. But they had some pressure, and Arsenal of old, and probably pains you as a Spurs fan, would have crumbled. They would have done. They were mentally weak. And they don't seem to have that anymore. They're going to be worst case top 3, but realistically first or second. So a 2.5 million starting defender who scores goals for a top 2 team competing for the league.
Insane, isn't it?
So I'm going to sell him for Trent.
Yeah. So it seems, I suppose, just to kind of summarize that bit there, is that when people like Saliba and Trippier, maybe Gabriel, Pope, we're not going to look to move off these players, even if budget allows, just to go to organically move to Trent or Robertson. It would have to be a massive fixture shift, right? Like a 4-for-1 or something, and that's if the budget is free for us to maybe move on to them, and then maybe even move back. Once the fixtures return back, it looks like we're not just waiting for the wheels to fall off and then we're going to move off them. We think that they're there on merit and that they're going to stay there and that they're going to keep performing, and they're just amazing value, which again, like these are kind of decision points to me which will make me think, right, do I go for Tavernier or do I go for someone like Martinelli or Saka or Foden and commit to spending my money in another place? Because historically I wouldn't. I would keep that money back to get back to Trent or get back to whatever. But it's a really good conversation there, and food for thought, because we have to adapt and we have to change our ways if we're going to have a successful season, right? Because normally we wouldn't be playing like this. Let's have a quick look then forward now. FA Cup draw was done in the middle of the World Cup, which was absolutely bizarre, but the FA Cup third round draw, and I believe there were 5 all Premier League ties, which does make things quite interesting from a Telegraph perspective. There was Man United against Everton, which means one of them obviously will be knocked out. Crystal Palace and Southampton, which doesn't really matter probably from a Telegraph view, even though Carl would probably have something to say about that. Liverpool and Wolves. You would expect Liverpool to win, but Liverpool's recent FA Cup third round performances, I think potentially excluding last year, haven't been the best, so you never know. And then one of the biggest ones, Manchester City versus Chelsea, which is really interesting for a number of reasons. In terms, obviously, one of them is going to be knocked out. There could be a replay in any of these games as well, which will give both teams a further match as well. So they're the big ones, in terms of at least 1 or 2 big teams will be knocked out. I've also missed out Brentford against West Ham, which may not seem kind of massively impactful, but Ivan Toney, maybe Jared Bowen, or someone like that. So it could it could have an impact. And then conversely, the ties, which are maybe ones to look at and potentially even target. Spurs home to Portsmouth is pretty good. Fulham away to Hull, you would expect. I'd probably expect Mitrovic to play in that, and maybe Pereira as well. Newcastle away to Sheffield Wednesday, to Carl's point earlier. If Newcastle play a strong team, that could be a good fixture to target as well. And then Arsenal away to Oxford, which will be good. We'll get to see the lineups for that one. That will be 8:00 on the Monday evening, which could potentially be a shift on there if they play a strong team. So I don't normally, I don't really target third round matches per se so much in the TFF game. I know, Luke, historically you love the FA Cup, probably in the latter rounds. Carl, what's your initial thoughts on the draw, and has it made you think of anything around, any strategy or any kind of ways of attacking these games? Or
Yeah, so normally I would lure myself and be tempted if, like, who did you say Spurs are homes as
under Portsmouth?
Yeah, but if there's like they play some non-league team and it's
they
like,
played
yeah,
Marine,
yeah,
and they won 5-0, and Vinicius Junior scored a hat trick.
So, like, but in many ways you do. I have ended up wasting transfers, but this season is a completely different ballpark. So I'm tending to go down this route and trying to ignore the third round. But this year is different. And I'll go on to a few points I wish to make. But before that, you mentioned about Leeds, Man City and Chelsea, possible to have a tie and get an extra game, which will be true. But I think when that gets played, the Man City Arsenal game would get postponed. So bear in mind,
you're right.
get that,
you're right.
you'd get that Man City game anyway. But so we haven't mentioned anything about Man United players, which is a bit odd because they never appeared anywhere. The two games I'm looking at is Hull versus Fulham. So if you've got I've got two Palace players, and if they get knocked out, or even if they don't get knocked out against Southampton, I'll be targeted a Fulham player. And you make so if they're playing, the reason being is the week before the next league game or game week, they've got the rearranged game with Chelsea. So they come right in between. Yeah. So you not only are getting that FA Cup game, you're also getting that rescheduled game. So you're getting like two extra games. So if you haven't got Mitrovic and he plays against Hull, stick him in because then he's got another game, a rearranged game thereafter. And the other team that I may target, depending on the lineup, could be Aston Villa versus Stevenage. So I don't know which league Stevenage are in, but they sound like leagues. They sound like quite low down. But not only are they playing that match, okay, they then play the Friday of the following game week with Man City playing Man United at 12:30 on the Saturday. So you could get that game against Stevenage, get them on the Friday night, and then you can transfer to a Man City player who then the following midweek have that rearranged game against Spurs, I think, or will be playing the replay against Man City. So if you think Villa are going to put out a strong team, or do put out a strong team, and you fancy one of the players, you can make the transfer there with the knowledge that you get the additional game on the Friday, transfer to Man City, which is 12:30, which is the only match before Man City play, who then play that 12:30, and then they get their rearranged game in the midweek thereafter. So it's like, because if you've got those rescheduled games coming up, you can use the FA Cup to make your little move before you in preparation for that double game week.
Very good, Carl. I like that. I like that indeed. Luke, anything to add from the FA Cup third round?
No, I mean there's always a little punt. I mean, if you're like you've got loads of transfers, but I don't know. The one that really sort of stands out that would be really interesting potentially is like Leeds United versus Cardiff City. So Bamford had just got fit before the World Cup. He's had a month of training. if he starts that game and you also think he's coming back in the team, that's the sort of game where maybe Bamford could easily get a hat trick or 4, and you would keep, because if he did do that, you'd then probably keep. I can't remember what Leeds runs like, but he is that sort of player I think for me, it's looking out for, the Spurs Portsmouth game. I'm just trying to go down the Brighton Borough game, Newcastle Wednesday, Villa Stevenage. If there's, it's a sort of Danny Ings, Watkins type thing that Villa if they're playing, it might be worth a punt if you've got 30 plus. If you're under 30, just sack it off. I mean, every team's playing once, so they may have a replay, but every team, so all of the Premier team players, you're not gaining really on the round, you're not gaining another fixture. And historically, I don't know, round 3, 4, 5, it's very rare you get a full strength team out. And apart from maybe the Man City Chelsea game, but even that, I bet one of them won't put a full strength team out. Yeah. Chelsea probably won't. So yeah, I don't know. I think at this stage it's still a watch and observe. When it gets interesting is when I think I can predict who the finalists and semi-finalists are going to be. And normally jump if it's going to be like Man City and Liverpool, that's when I tend to overload my teams with those sorts of players. So yeah, a bit meh at this season, and I can't see Plymouth anywhere in that list. It just feels really weird. So so where's the care? So
just so you know, Villa play Stevenage, and Stevenage are second in League 2. And I was having a look at Oxford as well. Oxford are currently 16th in League 1, so they're pretty good fixtures for Villa and Arsenal. I think I don't tend to bring in players apart from and any experienced TFF player will remember Saido Berahino when he scored 4 goals for West Brom against Gateshead a few years ago. I think it was 4 goals and an assist. It was absolutely crazy. And I brought in that one for like a 20 point or whatever it was. But normally I don't tend to bring in someone unless I'm going to keep them in my team. So I'm kind of looking at the Man City game, and I'm looking at the Arsenal game because they're probably the 2, and maybe Newcastle actually, because they're the 3 teams I think I'm probably going to look to target moving forward. I don't have enough of any of those teams, so that's just like a personal approach there. Let's have a look at the fixtures then moving forward. If we look at the Fantasy Football Hub ticker, Chelsea have got some very nice fixtures that have come in. They've also got some nice. They've either got stunning fixtures or they've got horrible fixtures. So their fixtures read Bournemouth and Forest, which obviously 2 really good ones. Then they have Man City, then Fulham. Then they have Man City in the FA Cup. Then they have Palace, Liverpool, and Fulham. So a very very mixed bag with Chelsea. Chelsea do have a lot of fixtures. They have the second highest amount of fixtures in the period between, I think it's the start of January and middle of February. They have the second highest amount of fixtures, but we've already said about Chelsea, we're not really sure where to go. Like players like Reece James, for example, he's absolutely fantastic, but I'm not sure how much he is. He's probably over 5 million, I would guess. Why would you go for him when you can go for Sven Botman for 2.9 million, for example? Second highest team on the ticker is Man City, who go Leeds, Everton, Chelsea. Then have Chelsea again in the FA Cup, so they play them back to back. But then have United and Tottenham. I think you touched on this earlier, Carl. So I think in a period of about 10 days or 2 weeks, Man City play Chelsea, Man United, Tottenham, and then they play Wolves, and then they play Spurs again. So they've got some really, really tough fixtures. But Man City do actually have the highest amount of fixtures from, I think it's the start of January to the middle of February. I think they play I was just having a quick look. From Sunday the 8th of January, Man City have got a 4-2 over Liverpool and Newcastle, and they've got a 4-1 over Man United. So it's the first 4-1 of the season. City have got a 4-1 over Man United. And then Man City have got an 8-4 over the same teams from Sunday the 8th of January to the 18th of February. So Man City play 8 times to Liverpool, Newcastle's, and Man United's 4 during that period. Chelsea have 7 fixtures in that period. So if you're looking for fixture volume, Man City in January play a lot of times, and Chelsea do as well. This obviously doesn't include any third round replays or FA Cup fourth round matches. Not forgetting that the fourth round of the FA Cup is at the end of January, is the weekend of the 28th, and it's got a dedicated weekend as well. So if the teams make it through, they're not going to have games postponed. They will just be added in. So Man City and Chelsea have got fixture volume, and as we know, Man City are just a team to target regardless. Third are Fulham, Palace, Southampton, Leicester, and Chelsea. I think it said Hull in the FA Cup. I want to say Newcastle, Spurs, and Chelsea. So they've got some quite really nice short-term fixtures before they turn a bit hairy. And down the bottom, Arsenal and Liverpool, probably two standout teams on the bottom. Their fixture's not very nice, and this is quite interesting. So Liverpool, they go Villa. Well, actually, their first 3 are pretty good, but they play 6 of their next 9 league games away from home, which is not good. And they're also playing against quite a lot of teams who score goals. So Villa, Leicester, and Brentford. So they go Villa away, Leicester at home, Brentford away. They then play the FA Cup. They then got Brighton away, and then Chelsea. So the way that Liverpool are defended, the way that those teams are attacking, you probably have to say that you would expect a few of those teams to score against Liverpool. And Arsenal fixtures are not the best either. So they're home to West Ham, which is probably quite decent. And then away to Brighton, which is going to be a really hard game for Arsenal. They've then got the North London derby against... no, they haven't. They're then home to Newcastle, which is going to be a tough game. They then got Oxford. They then got North London derby. And then they got Man United. So I suppose that my early sort of thoughts about these fixtures in general, I'm looking at Man City, Arsenal, Newcastle. Newcastle's fixtures are pretty good. But I'm not finding a real obvious hop-on point for them for different reasons. So when I think of Man City, I think of who would I jump on in defence. I go for Ederson, and I go for Cancelo, maybe Walker, but other than that, they've got 5 fit, very good centre-backs. Foden was on fire, but inexplicably didn't play. I think 3 out of the final 4 games. And if you still look at his points, he's still on 73 points, even though he's missed those games. He would be on nearly. He would be. I think if he played those other games, he would be the second highest scorer behind Haaland if he'd have played those extra games. But do you really want to play in a team who's not going to play? So that's issues with Man City. And as I say, Newcastle and Arsenal are pretty good, but up until after the FA Cup, they kind of go 1-for-1 fixture-wise with Liverpool. So if you've got Trent and Salah, for example, if you go 1-for-1, are you really going to downgrade? So I'm asking myself, am I going to downgrade Trent to Trippier when they've both got the same amount of fixtures in a short period of time? It doesn't make sense.
So I was thinking about this when you were talking about that very early in the pod. Trent Trippier is not a downgrade. It's a like for like.
It is a like for like.
If you gain another fixture,
that's fair,
and you gain 2 million, you're missing out on what you can do with that 2 million. And the longer you leave that, that 2 million is worth less money. Points per million between now and the end of the season.
That's fair.
And I don't know. Maybe it is the difference between Foden and KDB, because 2 million, that's what gets you. And you're talking about Foden being rotated. KDB is not getting rotated.
That's a really good point. Really good point. Yeah.
So yeah, Trent and Foden or Trips and KDB. I know which one I'd have.
That's right. So
I'd do it, mate. I would. Because you do it, I'll go the other way and I'll bring Trent in just as you get rid of him.
Well, I've got Salah as well, see, so I could just go Salah to KDB. It's crazy, but I suppose sorry, I know I'm kind of rambling on here. It's only because I've really looked at the fixtures for the first time yesterday and today, and my really initial thoughts are there's no massive standout options before like the middle of January where you'd say, oh, there's an obvious shift on to certain players or teams. They'd be pretty full, like I say, Trent to Trippier, for example. So anyway, I will shut up after having spoken non-stop for 10 minutes.
Who are you, me?
I know. Carl, in terms of, how the fixtures have presented themselves over the next sort of month or so, do you see any, any kind of opportunities, and what kind of moves are you looking at over this period?
Well, the first thing I would sort of say is when we talk about the optimal team, that would be that sort of seeing it in here to conversation is the sort of team I'd wish to go for in terms of the back four, the goalkeeper and the three defenders. And then what Luke sort of said is like, just makes sense. Like you've got those price points of all the other 7 players, and you can just flick them around because you've got 3 defenders. You can take Kane, put them in defence or in midfield, go 3-5-2 to bring in Trent or to bring in anybody who's got the short-term fixtures. Two other issues about fixtures that I mentioned it from below is firstly, before we get back to game week 17, we got the Carabao Cup where Liverpool are playing Man City, and I don't know when the other rounds are, but it wouldn't surprise me if they're sort of dotted in here as well. Which I'm only mentioning this because Man City have got lots of fixtures, as you've mentioned. Yeah. Plus, they've got the Carabao Cup if they beat Liverpool, which they probably will, and they've also got the Champions League to go in here somewhere. On these both legs, and I know they're a fortnight apart. So they will have a lot of games, and somebody we haven't mentioned, who's this, I don't know whether this is just a bias in my mind, is Ramirez of Man City, who like tends to sort of get picked around this time of year when they've got loads and loads of games and scores loads of points. Yeah. So he could be somebody you slot in. But in terms of my original name is what I mentioned about the cup, is jumping on Fulham. Not like loads, a couple of players for that cup game and for that because they got a double game week. And also jumping on Man City, or make sure that I've got a few players because of their extra fixtures. I'm not necessarily looking at defenders' mind. Yeah. Obviously we've got Haaland and probably go to Foden and maybe get one other. So it may be a defender because I've probably got those 2 mainstays. But otherwise from that, Arsenal have got extra fixtures. So it's those ones where they get rescheduled.
I think Alvarez as well. Obviously, we're not going to go for him immediately because he's away at the World Cup. But do think Alvarez is a player like, when there will be a point of the season, I think, where we kind of go all in on Man City, as in like you mentioned go in for like 4 or 5 of their players. I don't think you can go wrong in this period of going for Alvarez either, because he will definitely get minutes. He'll get minutes off the bench, and he will also start some games as well, won't he? I was just having a look how much he is. I've no idea how much he is actually. He is 4.6 million. So yeah, he's going to be one as well. I think who we're going to be looking at certain points in the season.
I think maybe certain points during the season, but that's very punty. Because Haaland is the main man. He may play some games.
I mean, alongside Haaland. I mean, you go KDB, Foden, Alvarez, and Haaland, because you're going to have the front 3 in most games.
Yeah, until he's played a fair amount of games, especially as you said, come back from the World Cup, probably be rested up. There's no urgency for Pep to bring him in.
No, agree.
So to me, he's waiting to see. I'll be loading up a little bit with Man City, but keeping an eye out because they may end up having a blank if they reach the League Cup final again. So you may want to, or you may not want to.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Flip around that.
Yeah.
But having 2 rescheduled games, I think they're definitely worth having several players in.
Good stuff. Luke, what are your thoughts around this next month or so of fixtures and talking about what we've talked about so far? And you're thinking, what are you thinking in terms of teams to target or?
Oh, I'm just quite happy because I'm full of Man City.
I know you are.
So...
I know you are.
So I think I'm looking at it with a view of Alisson. I'll swap him to Edison because I've got the exact money to do it, and I'll get an 8 for 4 on that, and the rest can stay. And so what if people don't play in the FA Cup? Foden's the only one, but they've got an FA Cup game. So if he's not playing the league, he's playing that FA Cup game. So he'll get until that, and then after that, I don't know if he's still not playing. I might switch him to Mahrez because Carl's right. The only time I've ever got Mahrez right was at the start of that season where they went mental. And since then, every season I've ever owned Mahrez, he does nothing. It's the same whenever I own Foden as well, to be honest. I think
they've got so many fixtures. It's quite unbelievable, actually. If I just have a quick read through of the fixtures that they've got. Where is it now? Because you are right, Carl. They're in the EFL as well. So they got the EFL Cup round of 16 against Liverpool on Thursday the 22nd of December. They got Leeds in the league on Wednesday the 28th. They got Everton on the 31st of December. They've got Chelsea on the 5th and also on the 8th. They've got Man United on the 14th. They've got Spurs on the 19th. They've got Wolves on the 22nd. There's then another FA Cup weekend. They then got Spurs again on the 5th. Villa on the 12th. Arsenal on the 15th. Forest on the 18th. And then they start the Champions League. So they're more or less playing every 3 days, or 4 days for the foreseeable. And this is why I personally think I'll go back to Alvarez. I don't mean now. I mean, I mean a few weeks. I can see me going up front with Alvarez and going for Haaland, Alvarez, and Foden and whoever else, because I think if you want to, every time I've had a successful season, I've gone all in at a team at a certain time, and it kind of reaches a point where no matter what fixture you've got, how many times, if you've got Haaland and Foden, just as an example, and they're both benched or one of them are benched, you've only got one piece of that attacking pie in a team where City, when they hit this time of the season, they not always, but they can score 3, 4, 5, 6 goals in any game. Whereas if you've got 5 City attackers, okay, 1 or 2 of them are going to be benched, but they're likely to come off the bench and they're going to start the next game. Whereas you've basically got the front 3 for Man City at any one time, and every time there's a goal, you've probably got the goal scorer and the assister in 3-0s, 4-0s, 5-0s, 5-1s and stuff. So that's the way I tend to play, is really attack those fixtures. But I reckon we'll all have Alvarez in our team by the end of January. I'll put that out there, I reckon. Just to touch on some transfer stats. So these were the remaining transfers for the Telegraph game. This was just prior to the World Cup, so they may have slightly dipped a little bit, but they will be about right. For the top 10,000, the average transfers remaining are 24 transfers for teams in the top 10,000. For the top 1,000, the average transfers are 16.3 left in the top 1,000. And the top 100, average transfers remaining are 8.78 transfers remaining for the top 100. So, I usually find that, if you're feeling if you're feeling you're not having a good season, when you read these out, you suddenly think, there's lots of time to go. So, Luke, what are your thoughts on those? Are they kind of higher or lower than you expected, or?
I'm very happy with those figures.
Yeah,
sitting just outside top 10k with 6 more than the average is
it's a
nice.
nice place to be, and a good team as well, which is obviously important as well. You've got your team in place, haven't you? So
I've lucked out a bit on those that fixture swing because I'm loaded up with the right ones. Normal seasons, I'm the wrong side of that equation. Yeah, I'd be interested on the usual suspects because I know Dan Sherwood's up there again after last season. He was up there.
yeah,
He's not going to, I mean, he must be, I don't know, top 1,000, if not top 500, 200 or something. He is not going to have 8 left. He's going to have 25 to 30, if not more. So there'll be 1 or 2 that are that's the interesting thing. There's probably 1 or 2 players in that top 10 or top 100 that are really pulling up that average as well.
Yeah.
So you with anybody who's got transfers left is going to fly up because they haven't got, well, people who've used that many, they don't know what they're doing in this game. Patience, first half, patience.
Carl, what are your thoughts on those numbers?
Yeah, I just wish I had more points, but yeah, no, the numbers are probably in line with what you expect. But as Luke sort of says, there's a lot of people, and as you pointed out, they haven't got many transfers left. So there's plenty of time to make up a lot of ground in this half. And especially if you use your transfers wisely and you've got them in hand, because there is time to go up a lot of places.
There are. I think the top 10,000 of 24 was, I think that was probably a bit more than I expected. I expected it to be around maybe 20, 21. So, but I'm sat on 34 or 35. With 9 or 10 above the average. I'm kind of outside that top 10,000, but I back myself as well. In these periods to use them wisely as well. There's a lot of managers in there who's already said who, even if they've got a lot of transfers left, I'm not talking about Dan Sherwood, obviously, because he's one of the best around, but there will also be a lot of players with a lot of transfers left who probably won't use them very effectively. They'll try and smash into the FA Cup third round and end up with a littered team of shite, which they then have to transfer back out of. Whereas, more experienced players will use that to strengthen their team and take advantage, but also look forward. So yeah, happy, I think. And it's really tough trying to when you get kind of newer players playing or less experienced players, just to be like, just hold on, now is not the time to attack. But it pays off in the second half, right? I've just got a list of a few players. We probably mentioned most of them actually. I'll just touch on some of the ones I haven't mentioned so far. I think we've touched on all the keepers. Defenders, Perisic 3.8 has done okay this season. Obviously he's been to the World Cup now, and when they got quite far, so I don't think he's going to be an option for a while. And Marty has quite surprised me in defence at 2.6 million. He has scored well, but I think Evans was out injured, so he's probably lost his place now. Dallo at 3.3 I think he looks pretty good actually, quite attacking. Akanji was one of the Man City ones. He's only 3 million. I mean, if Akanji nails a spot, at 3 million is a bargain. But even Stones at 3.8. You touched on Walker earlier, Luke at 4.3. I think they're all, they will be really good options moving forward. Midfielders, we've kind of done them to death a little bit. Just having a look if there's anyone I haven't really mentioned. Probably not. Trossard at 4.2. I think, looks really, really good. Saka at 5.1 as well. Martinelli at 4.1. So many. I've got a list of like 20 midfielders. We've touched on most of them, but any one of those, they're really, really good. And forwards, we haven't touched on Darwin Núñez at 6.3, probably because, he's a forward and he's overpriced. But with Jota obviously out and Diaz out now, Núñez is likely to start every game for Liverpool for the foreseeable. He could be an option at 6.3. We haven't mentioned Callum Wilson yet at 5 million. He is quite injury prone, But, he could be one when we spot maybe a 3-for-1 for Newcastle or 4-for-1. Kind of jump on him maybe. Rashford and Martial. It's a shame Rashford's classified as a forward in Telegraph, but Rashford at 4.7. Martial at 4.3. We haven't touched on those yet. And there is one player we haven't mentioned at all, who I reckon his ownership is going to rocket over these next few weeks. And it is Eddie Nketiah for Arsenal at 4 million, because obviously Jesus looks like he's going to be out for anywhere between 1 month and 3 months, which means Nketiah will likely take that number 9 spot up front for Arsenal. All the other apologies. Go on, Luke.
No, I was just going to say one name to possibly chuck into the mix is Wesley Fofana?
Yes, good shout.
Leicester guy.
Yeah,
because he nailed down a spot and then got injured. He's only 3.3.
Good shout.
And if Chelsea have got that backlog, 3.3, I thought it was going to be Cucurella at 3.4, and he's one of my wasted transfers. Sounds like I've wasted quite a few transfers actually, because he was one who brought in and he did nothing. But yeah, he could be one of those players if fit. I'm just looking for his injuries, and he's sort of still got the knee injury, but he's 75% on physio room, so he could well be fit. Be interesting to see if he's there for the starting that first game. Then he's one I would probably consider, because he should be a starting centre back for them. With the fixture backlog, he will certainly play 75% of the games that they've got there, which is 100% of a normal period. So if he gets 4 games out of 6, that's a good return for a 3.3, going for a good, relatively. And he's so much cheaper than all those other Chelsea players. Reece James at 5 million. I know, I probably would rather have Reece James, but that's a big saving.
Yeah, agree with that. Really good one there, Luke. Anyone to add there, Carl? Anyone we've missed at all? We've seen to mention about 100 players. There's so many options, but
no, I thought there was 2 excellent shapes by both of you. Sorry that I haven't got a third excellent one to bring to the party, but I'll definitely take notes.
Okay, good. Carl's been taking notes.
Just, I mean, one final one, a very super quick, staying with the Chelsea theme. I probably won't go there, but Mason Mount is probably the most nailed attacker. He's very expensive, in my opinion, for what he is.
Agree.
But he's that Maddison Foden price point again. So, why not? If Chelsea if he looks like he's going to play, and he's fit, he can run all day, that lad. So he could be a shout if money's no object. He's probably the one you would take from Chelsea. But
good shout. Yeah, good stuff there, chaps. Just quick look at ownership. I don't own 2 of the. No, I don't own 3 of. No, I don't own 4 of the top 7 owned players, but Erling Haaland, 65% owned. If you don't have Haaland, you probably, not having the best of seasons, let's be fair. I don't own Trippier, who is owned by 49% of the game. I definitely need to address that. Saliba at 2.5 is owned by 48%. So, I personally think in previous years that we wouldn't have seen Saliba be so highly owned. I wonder if he got a bit more of an engaged player base this year around. De Bruyne, 42%. Harry Kane, 37%. Jesus, 36%. So he's going to need to be shifted on. So that's another transfer gone from over a third of the game. Martinelli, 36%. I don't own him either. I've got Salah, 31%. Cancelo, 30%. Foden, 28%. Almiron, Luke, you mentioned about, you weren't sure of his ownership.
On that, wasn't it? I thought Tony would be owned by more.
23% owned. That is unbelievable. So, yes, people have jumped on them. Saka, 22%, Dyer, 21%, and then we go a bit further down. Trent, 16%. That will be reducing again, I think. Edison, 16% as well. So, yeah, some very... I think historically, when we've looked at this ownership slide, we've kind of looked at each other and gone, But that seems to be reasonably reflective of who's doing well this season and who's not. There's always players in there, like I don't know, you might see like, I don't know, Vardy in there, for example, or or someone like that. You think, what? Who the hell owns him, sort of thing. But that list is pretty good. It's a pretty good list, I think. So yeah, I think I probably need to address Trippier and De Bruyne, because not only because of their high ownership, but they're clearly two of the very, very best players in the game this season. So I'll probably be doing that quite sharpish. Any takeaways from there at all, chaps? Anything interesting?
I mean, I think your point on Saliba, you got to remember. So I got Saliba just before the first kickoff because Arsenal played on that Friday. So you saw the team sheet. So I actually started with Saliba and Martinelli because I've seen the team sheet. So you may have a few doing that. I'm just doing an interesting one because so there's a few players that aren't on that list, but I'm just looking for the sub 3 million who's highly owned list. And that's really interesting because you've got Saliba, then you've got Johnson, who's probably the next player after Trossard. So he'd be the next one on the list, which, I mean, nobody would be silly enough to still have him, would they, Fergie? But then you've got some, you've got Gahey, you've got Dean Henderson, you've got Felina is only 4% owned, Pereira 4% owned, Dan Burn 3.5% owned. These are all the players that we've been talking about. I mean, Dewsbury Hall 2.8, 2.9% owned. Like, it's crazy.
I can't believe Polina is only 4% owned.
4.12%. That's bonkers. That's
crazy.
Utterly bonkers.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree with you. Carl, any thoughts on the ownership at all?
No, I just agree with the point that you made. Like there's nobody odd in that list. But you think, like you say, the Vardys of this world, everybody there, they look good. In terms of the Polinos of this world, could be the quality of the manager. But I really do believe, going back to the optimal thing, is you don't need them.
You don't at the moment. No, you don't at the moment, do you?
Yeah,
you're right.
and therefore, under a normal season, when you've had money's a bit tight, they would be godsends. But it's a little bit more understandable, even though I reckon it's a mixture of both. You don't need them, and also that people aren't as aware.
I think as well, for players like Polina, why they're gold dust for us is because historically you look for a player there because it only enables the rest of your team, right? So I think that it's kind of what I tried to get out earlier in terms of I'm hoping that by having him as example in my team that I'll be able to take advantage of that later on in the season.
Yeah.
That kind of saving. So if I want to, I can have Haaland, Kane, and Salah, right? Whereas as people who have got 4 and 5 million midfielders who have done well, I got no argument. They've done well up until now, but when you average it out over a season, the trend tends to be that they're very streaky. While you can just get rock solid bonus points off your tackle merchants and then really attack the premium attackers, premium defenders at certain points. But no, we will see. It's interesting though, and as you say, it's some very interesting picks, and people have done well, right? People have done really well because players who started the season well have continued doing well. People like Trippier, Saliba, De Bruyne, Martinelli, Almiron, they haven't dropped off either, have they? They haven't been any of this, they've got on a really hot streak and then they just fallen off a cliff. They've all kept on going and done well. So I'm hoping that things revert back to the mean a little bit and then we can take advantage. We've had stacks of questions as usual. Thank you so much to everyone who has sent in some questions. We'll try and get through it. I think we probably answered a lot of them actually, but we will run through them to make sure we cover them all off. Mark Carberon on Twitter asks, have I missed the boat on Almiron? Or do you see him being like Bowen and being consistent the rest of the season worth bringing in? Carl, will you be bringing in Almiron?
There's a good chance there will be, yeah. You mentioned he scored goals in the friendlies recently, and he's very cheap. So yeah, Newcastle's good. It'd be a good pick, knowing that there's a risk that eventually he could get dropped because St Maxima. But I can't see that at the moment if he continues the way he is. So yes, you missed a bit of the boat. The first slice of the cake you've missed, but there's plenty of cake still there.
Luke, Almiron, will he be in your team soon?
He was in my team. He's another one I transferred out. I thought the boat would sink at one point, but I don't think it. So realistically, he's a front three guaranteed starter in a top 4 team. If you listen to what I said earlier, at a top 12 price. So
and he may also get an odd point for tackle bonus. He's a midfielder as well.
Yeah. So yeah, he's at the wrong price point. I don't have anybody in that price range, but I could easily go Foden down to him and free up some cash. But yeah. If I've at the right point, I will jump on him, and no desperate need to jump on him because he's not like, if he was a million less, I'd be like, he's essential. But yeah, I will. If there's an opportunity for multiple games over someone, then yes, I will.
Yeah, I think he's going to be in my team very soon. I think Almiron and Trippier will be making an appearance. They're just ridiculous value, not showing any signs of slowing up. Newcastle look fantastic. So yeah, I think he'll be in my team very soon. Matt Woolley, with no huge fires to put out, would you start considering using some transfers with some of January to February fixture gains? It's a good question. I think on my team, I've got 2 or 3 players I want to move on, and 2 or 3 players I want to bring in. I've already mentioned Trippier, Almiron, probably De Bruyne as well. I'm not sure about the keeper, whether to keep Alisson or not, whether to move him on. But I'm just going to leave it a little while. There's a few games first where Liverpool and Man City go toe-to-toe. Liverpool have actually started off with a 4-3 over Man City, so I'm probably going to leave them in for that. But then once we start this, I mentioned it earlier, this 8-4, I'm probably going to move on. Salah, Trent, Brennan Johnson, finally move him on, and maybe Alisson, and make some moves then. But I still don't think, and this is going to pee a lot of people off, I still don't think we're at that point yet where there's these massive obvious shifts. And, as I say, experienced players will know to wait. They'll know to wait because they know they're coming. But I don't see any yet until I think 8th or 9th of January is the first time where you see a bit of a shift. Man City got a 4-1 over Man United, for example, at that point. So if you are holding on to a Man United player, a 4-1, right? Just move them on for a City player, for example. But other than that, until we get the fallout from the FA Cup third round in terms of replays, and we know who's going through and who's going out, I think that's the point where you start to make serious moves on your team, personally. Carl, thoughts on using transfer? I know you've mentioned a couple of Fulham players. Have you got your eye on anyone else?
No, a few Man City and Arsenal players because of their extra games. And I mean, funny enough, after today, I'm going to try to start shifting towards that optimal team and its structure at the right points.
Yeah.
So after that, once Palace play their cup game, there's an opportunity maybe to move them on. So like Foden, if he's playing against Chelsea, it gets me to a place that I want to be, and also picking up those extra fixtures. So it's just a matter of, Almiron, bring him in at the right point. So I can get that structure from the optimal team, and then do what have the flexibility to shift because the price points are so good.
Yeah, awesome. And Luke?
Yeah, I mean, I think I stand by where I was earlier. That I'm gonna attack fixtures. I've got transfers, but it's got to be the right switches to warrant. I'm almost got. It's price points this year.
Agree.
So I hope Salah hits Salah hitting form right. I'll go straight from KDB to him if I can get a 2-for-1 or a 3-for-4 or something. Sorry, 4-for-3. But yeah, it's all about the price points. I think
we haven't really touched on that actually, but that is a massively important point, and that's something which I've really paid attention to this season, is making sure basically I can get to any player in one move. So this is why I don't naturally, kind of gravitate towards 5 million midfielders, because I think they chew up a lot of budget. That where you want to jump on a block defense or jump on a Salah or a Kane, for example, you can't. You have to make 2 moves to get to them. So maintaining the price points, as you say there, Luke, I think is massive, and the ability to go from Kane maybe to Salah, or even down to someone like Trent for a 3-for-1, then back to Kane or whatever else. This is why Linears and all that are just gold dust, because they just enable those all the time, don't they? But yeah, it's a really good point around price points. Daniel Moody says Tony, Mitro, both or neither. Interesting one there. I think, Carl, you fancy Mitro of the two by the sound of it, do you, or no?
No. In the short, in the short term, I'll be going for Mitro.
Yeah.
But but when I say short term, I mean within 2 or 3 weeks, and then he'll be gone.
Yeah.
I'd probably prefer Tony. Okay. I think it will score more goals.
Yeah, agree with that.
Get more points. And what was the third name?
Both or neither. So it's only 2 players.
Yeah. Not both, because I don't think they're too cheap. I think you can spend your money better. But my preference would be Tony, assuming he don't get banned, of course.
Yeah. Luke, yourself?
Probably neither. The reason being, Haaland's broken the game. So unless Haaland stops breaking the game and actually playing one up front becomes feasible, without Haaland, Kane would be the highest scoring point scorer. So there's 2. So it's definitely not both, because you need those 2, because there's so much budget going around this year. And then if you look at their price points, and then you look into midfield or you look into defence, you've got players who've scored the same or more points for less money. So why would you fill that third spot? Yeah. I think they're great value. And if you were playing one up front and it's one of those 2, great. But if you're playing one up front, why isn't it Haaland? In which case, then you don't need one of those guys, because there's better value in midfield or defence. So neither, but for a very logical reason. I think they're both good picks, and if you own them, I wouldn't be looking to sell them.
Yeah, I'm on the same lines of you, I think. The thing with Brentford and Fulham is they're probably not going to have 3-for-1s over different teams, and this is what I'm looking for now. I'm looking for those extended runs I can daisy chain players on. So they may win their FA Cup games, but I just can't see many opportunities for me to bring them in, daisy chain, and move them off. But
Mitro versus Hull City, Fulham versus Hull City. If Mitro starts that game, that could be a really good move. I mean, I wouldn't rule that out. Brentford are playing West Ham, so yeah. I mean, it's Mitro. There's a minor chance I might go. Do you know what? I'm going to roll the dice.
It depends who you're taking out as well, though, because this is the thing: is who you're taking out.
Yeah. Well, it would have to be Foden for me on my price structure.
Exactly. So, but then Foden's got 4 games in 3 hours or something. So it's that's the hard part for me. It's not only who to bring, because in isolation, Tony and Mitrovic are both cracking players, cracking picks, both on penalties. But it's who do you take out, and even if they score a goal in 3 games and you get 21 points off them, if you've taken someone out and then you have to move them on again, that's 2 transfers for 21 points, and you will have likely lost points off the players you've taken out as well. So this is why I'm never massively thinking on going for players of that ilk. Mark also asks...
So just if you're looking Fulham, Felina at 2.8 million, 62 points. Mitrovic, 4.3 million, 63 points. There's your answer. Go for the 2.8 million player in the same team.
I agree. Mark asks, what are your view on Man City's defence? With Chelsea, United and Spurs twice the next 6 to 8 weeks, would you hold off until February? Yes, it's kind of what we touched on earlier. I think Cancelo, his ownership is really high, and I just think he's just a wonderful asset. He's not a player I would take out and bring back in. He's just in for me all season. The same as Trent, even though Trent's having a mare, so he is going. But I think I touched on it earlier. I think Cancelo and Ederson are two that I would probably just look to keep because they got pure volume of fixtures. But I do think everyone else is a big rotation risk, including Walker. So I think you mentioned earlier Alisson to Ederson at the start of this at like 8 for 4 could be a really good move. Just leave him for the season, right? But I'm not sure other than that because there's going to be massive rotation. So that's my thoughts. Carl, what do you think on City's defence?
Yeah, I'm steering a little bit more clear because harping back to what I said before, I don't think that the cost is worth it, considering what you have to give up the rest of your team and given what Arsenal and Newcastle are providing. And in addition to that, I don't know who's going to be in Man City defence. I really don't. I think I love watching. I thought it was going to be like Diaz and Laporte, and neither of them seem to be playing. And then you got Ake, then you've got the Swedish chap, and you got John Stones. It's like, I'd find that quite frustrating. I find that frustrating, having them and then they don't play.
And the thing with
when they do play, they give up a goal.
And the thing with centre backs as well is they don't tend to come on even for like a part clean sheet, do they? So if they don't play, they don't get any points. Which is really annoying as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Luke, are you interested in Man City defence?
I've got Cancelo. I'll probably go to Ederson. And I think at that point I have 5 or 6 Man City players, so I've probably got to go, that's enough.
Yeah, it is. You're doing all right. Neil Baker asks for the optimal formation. 3-4-3. Neil, as you would have seen earlier. Which teams are you on over the next 4 to 6 weeks? I think we've covered that, I think. Really good question. How many transfers would you aim to have in hand by the next international break in March? That is a good question. We haven't touched on that yet. In terms of I'm not quite sure what that means in game weeks. I think it's probably roughly, it'd be more than half of what's left of the season. So, how many transfers left by the end of March? Bear in mind, we'll only have April then, and May. So we'll have roughly 2/5 of what's left now. Any thoughts on that at all? Transfers left at that point?
I'm aiming to use 12 to 14 between now and then because the FA Cup has less impact and there are more rearranged fixtures towards the tail end of the season. So it really depends on fixture congestion. If there's one team that gets a ridiculous, if Man City suddenly get 2 postponed games that come in as well, and then they've got, 10 for 4 or something rather than 8 for 4. I'm just going to I'll literally have 11 Man City players at that point. But yeah, beyond that, I'm going to not use my full allocation because you do get those extra FA Cup games. Teams do play strong teams in the semis and the final, so they are worthwhile games. You've got more info as well, but equally, I don't want to be left with 25 transfers or 20 transfers at that point because I won't use them all, and I'm suddenly then looking at 7-8 points a transfer, not 10 or 12. So you've got to use enough.
Yeah, no, really good point. Carl, how many do you hope to have left by the end of March?
I don't put a particular number on it, and I think Luke covered the main points. A lot of it depends on when the rescheduled games go in, and if they're going to be like scattered around because we've got a whole week to go in, and whether that goes in as a whole week or whether they move some here and there. So it depends on how that goes on. Naturally, I wish to keep enough for the end of the rearranged games with the extra games of the FA Cup. But even that would be, if opportunities arise, I will try to take advantage. But I've got no set number. I've got no set number as such, especially this season.
My rule of thumb, Fergie, on TFF is not look at the season in quarters, but the first two quarters are 1/3. So the season is a third. So the first half of the season is a third of your transfers. The next quarter is a third of your transfers, and the last quarter is a third of your transfers. And I think you're about right. That's about the right pace to do it. But you've got to roll with the fixtures, and you've got to roll with the form. And last season I had about 4 or 5 injuries in the space of a bloody week, and I ended up having to make 4 injury-related transfers at one point. It was a nightmare. But if those injuries could force your hand, the fixtures may force your hand. So just be flexible, as Carl said. Don't put a real hard number on it. But yeah, as a rough aim, I want to use a third of my transfers. So yeah, 12 to 14, 15 max, really.
Yeah. I think with 34 or 35 left, which is obviously a lot, I like to do the pylon, I like to do a pylon, but I don't know when that pylon point is yet. So again, it's very hard to say, I'll have X amount, because they're two, it could work out, it could transpire that there are 2 massive pylon points between now and then. It could be that Man City and Liverpool or Arsenal go back to back 4-for-1s each, just as an example, whereas they may not. That may happen later in the season. So a lot for it depends on me on the third round of the FA Cup. I think that's huge for me, and also who wins out of Man City and Liverpool in the EFL Cup, and who will play in the final and who won't, because a team will emerge. I think we'll see a couple of 5-for-1s with big teams involved, which to me is the point where I'm more than happy to use like 6 or 7 transfers in 2 weeks to absolutely pile it on a team and then gradually move off them again. So in terms of a number left by the end of March, I'd like to think I would, even if I did do a few pylons, I would still have between like 15 and 20 left. Probably more towards the 15. But I do like your point, Luke, about the value of a transfer decreases the further on into the season you get, right, as well. So it's all just a balancing act, and it's reacting, I think, to opportunity for me.
I think the key take out there is whoever goes out drinking next with Fergie, he likes a pylon. So just get him when he least suspects it and jump on him. He loves it.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you, Luke. I still haven't forgotten that Harry Kane thing in the pub last year. That still haunts me to this day.
Best laugh I had last year, that was. It was brilliant.
Haunts me to this day. We've had a few questions. We had one off Ewan McConnell. We also had one off Morris Green and a couple of others as well around, big at the back. Is it dead? Is it dead? One word answer off you, Luke.
No.
Okay.
Best thing since sliced bread.
Carl, is big at the back dead for this season anyway?
For this season, yeah.
Okay. I think I agree for this season. I just can't see Liverpool. We even mentioned it last year, right? How many times Alisson saved Liverpool's clean sheets with his ridiculous saves, and Liverpool's expected goals conceded wasn't. It's never very good because the actual defending is not very good, but Alisson is just outstanding. But even this year, they've just been bombarded, and teams aren't scared of them anymore, are they? So, no, I agree, and I think even with Man City, if we do get a point that we have a settled Man City back for, I think they're underpriced because say if it's like Stones is 3.8, Laporte is 4.5, Diaz is more, I think. even if there is a pile on Man City, I think they're cheap enough. You can actually afford to pile on as well. But yeah. Mark asks, is Pope, Botman and Trippier too reliant on Newcastle, or do you see them be like Spurs and Arsenal and being better value than the rotating City defence and the out of form Liverpool? So Newcastle defence going forward, chaps. Are we thumbs up?
No, it's value. It doesn't matter who they play for. If they pick up 18 points over 5 games, brilliant. Doesn't matter whether it's 3 in a row or 1 not. You know what I mean? It's a great value.
Yep. Matt Stevens asks around a good few cheap midfielders in the Norgard mould. Yep, we've gone through them in depth, Matt. We've named about.
He's dead now, isn't he? Compared to some of these others.
We've named about
3s. I mean, nosebleed territory.
Yeah. I think we've named about 9 or 10 players in there. Last couple of questions. Neil asks, give us 2 bolters each for the second half. I'm assuming by bolters. I'm not familiar with the term. I'm assuming it's probably because of the part of country I come from. I'm assuming a bolter is like a really, really good pick. I'm guessing.
Lightning bolt.
I don't know if you guys know, do you?
I think it's lightning bolt. So yeah.
Okay, fine, yeah. I'll give you guys just a second to have a think, unless you've got them to hand. But I'll just have I'll go on then.
Yeah. So Zinchenko's one.
Oof,
got injured. We haven't really talked about him.
3.2 million.
Back in. Yeah.
Good pick.
Just talked about him at the start of the season. So he's one. I'll let you guys go again because I've got another one. But
Carl, have you got a bolter to hand?
Well, I haven't, because I don't think you need them. But if, under a normal year, I've already mentioned him, Lavia, and we've also mentioned Taverner of Bournemouth would be, by definition of bolters.
Yeah.
Good and cheap. Good top players.
Right. I will go for, and this is going to be for a specific spell, right? But I think Julian Alvarez is going to score a lot of points at a certain point in this season, and we will be in all our teams at one point. So I'm going to go for Alvarez alongside Haaland, obviously. Unless if Haaland gets injured, Alvarez will be in all our teams. But I'm going to go for Alvarez at certain points. Luke, have you got another?
Well, yeah, there's a couple of players. So Carl's mentioned one. Mahrez will have a purple patch. He always does, and he's right. It's around about now. I always get it wrong, for the record. So whenever I do it and I post that, I will post it on Twitter that I've done that. Don't do it. Trent will come back. This is up there with my Harry Kane pick from last season. That the top 3 scoring player of Trent. What an out there pick. He will come back. He will get like 12 points, 18 points, 6 points, 12 points at some point, and we'll all be like, oh, so obvious.
I'm thinking of taking him out, for God's sake. Anyway. Okay.
And sorry, just popped in my head the Ketia for Arsenal.
Yeah. Good shout.
The one you mentioned earlier.
Good shout. I think the other player, he's, I'm probably not going to bring him into my team, but I do think Rodrigo at Leeds is a very, very underrated player. And I think he's going to score a lot of points still this season. So real out there ones, Alvarez and Rodrigo for me.
Not if Bamford gets those 4 goals, he's guaranteed to get against Cardiff City, though.
I think Rodrigo's better. Like the way that the manager's talked, he's talked about Rodrigo. He's called him world class, I think. So I think he's going to have a stormer at some point. So Carl's gone for Tavernier and Lavia and Nketiah. He cheated there. He had 3. Luke, you went for.
Zinchenko
and Mahrez. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I went for Alvarez.
Trent, so I had 3.
You had 3 as well? Oh, in that case, I'm having a 3rd. In that case, then, I will go for...
Why don't you just pick Haaland?
Can't pick Haaland. This is a tough one, actually, because... No, I'll stick with the 2 because all the rest are really popular. So there's no point. They're not bolters. I need to know what the definition of a bolter is before I go to sleep tonight. I'll have a look now when we're thinking. I think that is it for the questions. We've just a question off for reasons unknown. Currently 2K with 25 transfers left. Is the top 100 realistic from here? 2K with 25 left. Is the top 100 realistic? What do you think?
Yes.
Carl, do you think it's realistic? Carl's laughing.
It's more than realistic. That should be maybe your minimum target.
Wow. Okay. I'm maybe not as bullish as you two. Only because I know that there's a lot of very, very good players swooping at the end. I'll never forget last year, the winner, Peter Marshall. We did a pod, I think it was the end of March, and I was on like 5 transfers left, or even 4. I think you guys were kind of, similar. You may have had like 6 or something. And Peter Marshall said, how do I best work like 14 transfers? And I was like, what? I thought he was joking, but he wasn't, and he ended up winning it. And I've always got that in the back of my mind, always when I'm thinking about transfers left. There's still a lot of opportunities late in the season. We have had 3 questions in from Simon Baldock as well. Is there a player from the top 20% ownership that you are scared of not owning? And do you have any plans to get them in? Good question. Are you scared of anyone, Carl? Are you scared of any highly owned players?
No, I don't tend to be scared of many players, especially in the Telegraph.
Yeah.
More so in Sky when you get captaincies and double points if they have a big week. No. Because I don't think there's any player. Well, Haaland, if I didn't have him, I'd be scared of him.
Yeah.
But I've got him. So if there's somebody I'm really scared of like him, then I'd get them in.
Luke, anyone you're scared of that you don't own? Or I think you've got them all, haven't you?
Yeah. No, I don't have Salah, and he is the only one who can. I'm genuinely like he could score back-to-back hat tricks. The rest can't. And as Carl says, it's a value. It's not like FPL where people have captained them or Sky where they've captained. They can't hurt that much. It's a value game. Yeah. But Salah or Trent, even Robbo, they've got those mega hauls in them and they can do it. Well, they've done it year in, year out, where they've done it back to back. That's what can really hurt. So those are the only ones. But I'm looking down the list and I own Jesus, he's injured, so I'm glad I don't own him. But I own I've got the top 5. So it's very template though, isn't it? That's the problem. How can I go up if they all bang?
Don't worry about
that. But yeah, Salah is the one that I'm most. But the rest, is okay, fine, whatever.
I don't have Trippier or KDB, but I will be bringing them both in. I'll probably do Salah to KDB when that 8-for-4 kicks off, and I'm not sure then about Trippier, but I'll be bringing him in soon. But as I say, just a straightforward Trent to Trippier without an extra fix is not really worth it. But Salah to KBD, I think that release enough funds me to actually move someone like, I don't know.
Can you get Dyer to him?
I can get Dyer to him, yeah. So yeah. Oh yeah. I could do that for free. Yeah, I could do that. So yeah, they're the 2, and Almiron, but I'm not scared of Almiron, but I think he's a really good pick, so I'm going to bring him in as well. Simon also asks, team is currently way back at 39k. Started the season with a 5-4-1, now shifted to 3-4-3. To try and climb. Any tips for a maverick and safe way to play? Like 39k is fine, so you've got 30 plus transfers left. Sounds like you've got a pretty good team. I just wouldn't worry. I would just keep playing sensibly and you will organically rise, would be my advice. Anything there, guys? You think 39k is a bit too far away? Or?
We talked about it with your team a few years back. Well, all of our teams actually were. I was around 30, 40k. You were around 70. I think Carl was somewhere in between or slightly over. But like we all finished top 10k because we were sensible. So if you've got the transfers, you're going to halve your rank just by doing nothing, because everybody else can't make transfers when they need to.
Exactly.
So yeah, you'll be fine.
Anything to add there, Carl?
No, nothing to add. Just be sensible.
Yeah, agree.
Make good choices.
And go on, Luke.
No, I was just going to say, best advice in this game: just make right choice.
Yeah.
Be sensible.
And Simon also asks, I believe Simon's based in New Zealand. He says, has there been a TFF meetup before? We're going to be visiting the UK for the first time in over 10 years in June or July this year. Is it something that might be of interest? And if so, where is easiest? I don't think there's been a specific TFF one, but there have been a lot of TFF managers, including myself and Luke, have attended some, FPL ones and the odd Sky ones. So yeah, absolutely, Simon. Stay in touch, and I'm, we normally do something in the summer. Usually either kind of Bristol way or London way. Bristol or London is probably the best. So yeah, stay in touch. Okay then, let's just have a final quick look at our teams. And after all that chat, because what I usually end up doing now is completely rethinking it all and going forward. So Carl, we've got your team on screen. What are you doing in the next few weeks with your team?
Yeah, well, I feel like I'm on repeat. I'm basically going to...
I'm going to bring in some Fulham players.
Well, I'm going to take advantage of the short-term double fixtures, but at the same time move towards that optimal team, keeping that defence in the optimal team, and then moving those other 7 players around to take advantage of any fixture runs. Yeah. But that will be my core, and then it'll be just like a little move here and a little move there. And yeah, I look forward to it, and I'll be looking forward to chasing you down, or at least getting you within my sight.
In your crosshairs. You've got a really good team there, Carl. Once you get rid of Gahey and Odyssey, you're laughing. Once you move them on, you're laughing. You've got a really good structure and team though, Carl. Absolutely superb. Luke, you don't need to do anything to your team, you swine.
Yeah, I'm not going to. That's the intention. So Alisson may go, may not. Foden may go, may not. KDB may go, may not. The rest of this set forget pretty much.
Cracking team. Yeah, not much work or surgery on your team needed at the moment. My team, like I say, I've got Saliba and Trent will probably be on the chopping block after, I think, the 8th of January. Brennan Johnson definitely on the chopping block, and maybe Alisson as well. So I've got four potential transfers there for very likely Trippier, KDB, Almiron, and maybe Pope. I'm not sure on the keeper, but interestingly enough, I'll only move closer towards your team there, Luke. So, and then we'll be on basically level transfers. So yeah, we're very, very close.
Definitely do all of those moves, considering how many mini leagues we're in together. Yeah,
this is it. This is it. So, and maybe Dyer out as well. I may have a bit of a 4 or 5 transfer splurge over the next month. Well, over the next 3 weeks, and then we'll see. You never know. Opportunities will arise, but I'm an all-in player, so don't be Luke, if you do see me kind of surge ahead at some point, because I'll have gone all in somewhere.
You always do.
I love the all in. Love it. Quick update on the Hub Mini League. 10th place, Stephen Boyd. 9th place, Sam Wood. 8th, Arwin Vobe. 7th, Mark Rose. 6th, Mick Barker. 5th, Andrew Garment. 4th, Andrew Salmon. 3rd, Michael Roman. 2nd, David Martinez. And top, Mark Rose. 231st place overall. Very, very well played there, Mark. It is early days, but you've had a very, very good start there. So very, very well played. And that is it for us. 2 hours 24, gents. Not bad. Not our longest, not our shortest. Luke did say let's try and keep it under an hour before we started, but not too bad. Seems you're only doing every 3 or 4 or 6 months. Not bad.
That went horribly wrong when you said, "How are you, Luke?" Yes.
How are you, Luke? All of a sudden we lose 25 minutes. thank you so much, gents. As usual, we really, really I know all the viewers and all the listeners really look forward to these pods and your insights. So thank you so much to both of you. Absolutely superb. Carl, where can people find you?
Yeah, probably the best places on Twitter at Darkest Jungle, and I also write some articles on the Hub this season.
You do for TFF and Sky as well, don't you? You've been doing.
Yeah, I've been doing the more Sky articles on the Hub this year.
And Luke, thank you so much as usual. And where can people find you?
So on Twitter, it's _FPL equation. Sorry, FPL _equation. And I'm in most of the Hub WhatsApp groups for various things. I apologise now. My response rate at the moment. I started a new job 6 months ago, so I don't have much time to browse social media at the moment. So I will respond, but it's likely to be a lot slower than it used to be.
And finally, thank you everyone who is watching this, listening to this, and who has took the time to send in some questions. And a big shout out to our Fantasy Football Hub WhatsApp group. Some of them are already absolutely flying in there. So this video recording will be on the Fantasy Football Hub, Sky and Telegraph YouTube channels. If you play Sky as well, make sure you subscribe. We do a Sky pod every week. With the podcast versions available on all major podcast platforms. If you like what you watched, please press the like button. We really, really appreciate it. Remember to subscribe to the channel at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. If you enjoyed your listen, please rate the podcast and leave a comment. Our website is fantasyfootballhub.co.uk, where you'll find everything you need for fantasy football under one roof, including all our tools. If you play FPL, everything you'll ever need for FPL. We've just launched our new recommended transfers for FPL as well. So basically, it kind of recommends the most optimal transfer for your team every single week. We've also got loads of stuff on Sky Fantasy, loads of stuff on Telegraph Fantasy as well. We also have a dedicated Telegraph WhatsApp group for premium members. If you are interested, click in the link to join that group. We're partnered with ffstuff.co.uk, which alongside the Hub has the best Telegraph fantasy resources. So take a look at ffstuff.co.uk. And also Ian Parrin does a Telegraph transfer planner, which is also absolutely fantastic. So make sure you take a look at that. We wish you a fantastic Christmas and New Year, and more importantly, plenty of TFF points going into January. We will probably be back towards the end of March. As we'll look at the final run-in. But in the meantime, have a fantastic Christmas, New Year, as they say, and goodbye for now.